All right, so today we're diving into something that might seem a little unsettling at first.
Yeah.
IRS identity verification.
Uh,
Imagine getting a letter asking you to prove you're you.
right.
That's what we're breaking down today.
Yeah.
Why the IRS does
Yeah.
this,
Right.
what it means for you,
Uh-huh.
and how to navigate this whole process.
It might feel unusual, but it's actually a crucial part of how the IRS fights tax fraud and identity theft.
Makes sense. After all, nobody wants their tax refund going to the wrong person.
Sure.
So where do we even begin with this whole identity verification thing?
Well, it's important to understand that there are two main types of verification.
Oh.
ID Verify, which is specifically for accessing your online IRS account,
Uh-huh.
and identity verification, which is a broader process used to confirm your identity when you're filing your tax return.
Okay, so two separate things. Let's start with ID Verify. What's the deal with that?
If you need to log into your IRS account online, you might be asked to go through ID Verify using a service called IDMA.
Okay.
Think of it as an extra layer of security to make sure it's really you accessing your sensitive information.
So it's all about protecting your account from unauthorized access.
Exactly.
What happens during this IDMA process?
You'll need to provide some personal information to confirm your identity. And then you'll have to answer some questions about your tax return history, just to be extra sure.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Two-step verification for the win.
Yep.
Now, what about the other type? Identity verification during tax filing.
Right.
When does that come into play?
The IRS might ask for this if something on your return raises a red flag. Maybe there's a discrepancy in your information or something seems out of the ordinary.
So they're looking for potential signs of fraud.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're constantly analyzing data to identify suspicious activity and protect both themselves and taxpayers.
Right.
And this is really important.
Yeah.
They'll never reach out to you first through phone, email, or text to ask for your personal information.
Got it.
If you get a message like that, it's a scam.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
We should all be on the lookout for those scams,
Mm-hmm.
especially during tax season.
Oh, yeah.
So let's say the IRS does need to verify my identity during tax filing.
Okay.
How would I even know?
They will send you a letter to the address they have on file.
That brings up another important point, keeping your contact information up to date with the IRS.
Right.
Otherwise, you might miss important communication.
You wouldn't believe how many people forget to do that.
Right.
It's a simple step that can save you a lot of trouble down the line.
All right, so you get this letter in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
What are your options for actually verifying your identity with the IRS?
The IRS offers a few different methods, each with its own process.
Yeah.
The most convenient option is usually online verification through their website.
Online is always a plus for me. What would I need to do for that?
You'd go to the IRS website and navigate to the identity verification service.
Uh-huh.
They'll ask for some key information to confirm your identity, like your social security number, ITIN,
Mm-hmm.
details from your previous year's tax return,
Okay.
and maybe some supporting documents like your W-2s.
So basically, be ready to prove who you say you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if the IRS specifically requests phone verification,
Uh-huh.
they'll provide a number for you to call.
Okay.
Have your tax return details and some personal identification handy.
Okay, phone verification. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other way they might ask you to verify?
Yes. In some cases, the IRS might request in-person verification.
Yeah.
You'll need to schedule an appointment at your local taxpayer assistance center
Okay.
and bring two forms of identification, like
Yeah.
your passport,
Yeah.
driver's license, or social security card.
So if they need to see you in person, they'll let you know. Makes sense.
Exactly.
Now, let's say you've gone through the verification process.
Okay.
What happens next?
Well, if everything checks out, the IRS will continue processing your return.
Phew, relief. But I'm guessing it might take a bit longer.
You're right. They say your refund could be delayed by an extra 3 to 9 weeks.
That's quite a... Wait, what happens if the verification isn't successful for some reason?
In that case, you might need to provide additional documentation or, in some situations, file a paper return.
Paper returns, the tax filing method of the past.
Yeah,
I'm guessing most people want to avoid that if possible.
absolutely. It's definitely a less convenient process.
It is.
Speaking of avoiding issues, are there any proactive steps people can take to make this whole verification process smoother?
That's a great question. I'm all ears.
Well, one of the best things you can do is file your tax return early.
I've heard that before. Why does filing early help in this case?
Think about it this way. If you file early, you're reducing the chances of a scammer filing a fraudulent return in your name before you do.
Yeah.
It's like beating them to the punch.
That makes a lot of sense. Getting ahead of those scammers is key. Any other tips to avoid verification headaches?
Another helpful tip is to opt for direct deposit for your refund.
Right.
It's not only faster than waiting for a paper check, but it also eliminates the risk of that check being stolen or lost in the mail.
Direct deposit, a win-win for speed and security. What else can we do?
And we've already talked about keeping your contact information current with the IRS.
Right.
That's one of the simplest yet most effective ways to avoid communication breakdowns and potential delays.
Right. Make sure the IRS knows where to reach you. Anything else?
If you're particularly concerned about identity theft, you might want to consider getting an identity protection from the IRS.
What is it exactly?
It's a 6-digit number that acts like an extra layer of security for your tax account. You use it when you file, and it helps prevent someone else from filing a return using your Social Security number.
So an IPPIN is like having a secret code for
Yeah.
your taxes. I like it. I'm guessing the IRS website has more information about that.
They do. You can find all the details about IPPINs on their website.
Okay, so file early, choose direct deposit, keep your contact info current, and consider an IPPIN. Those are some great tips to avoid future verification issues.
Exactly. Being proactive and informed can make a big difference.
Now I'm curious, what about the role of technology companies like IDMay in all of this?
That's a fascinating question. It's worth thinking about how these companies are becoming more and more involved in verifying our identities for various purposes, even something as traditional as filing taxes.
It really shows how our digital lives are intertwining with these important processes. We could probably spend a whole other episode unpacking that topic.
We could. There's a lot to explore there. But for now, let's focus on what happens after you've been verified by the IRS.
Sounds good. Let's break that down.
So let's assume you've successfully verified your identity.
Okay.
The IRS can then move forward with processing your return. However, as we mentioned before, your refund might be slightly delayed,
Yeah.
potentially by 3 to 9 weeks.
That's a long time to wait for your refund, especially if you're relying on it. Is there any way to speed up the process once you've been verified?
Unfortunately, not really. Once it's in the IRS's hands, you just kind of have to be patient.
Okay, so patience is key.
Yep.
Now, what if the verification is unsuccessful?
Mm-hmm.
What are the next steps?
If the IRS can't verify your identity,
Yeah.
they'll likely reach out to you for additional documentation.
What?
They might ask for things like copies of your ID,
Mm-hmm.
pay stubs, or other proof of your identity.
So even if the initial verification doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. It just means you'll need to provide a little more information.
And in some cases, they might request that dreaded paper return, right?
Yes, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, but sometimes it's necessary to ensure everything is accurate and legitimate.
We've talked about what to do after verification. But let's circle back to those proactive steps we discussed earlier.
Okay.
It's worth reiterating how people can make this whole process smoother from the start.
You're absolutely right. A little preparation can go a long way.
So hit us with those key tips again.
Okay.
What can people do to avoid verification headaches in the first place?
First and foremost, file early.
Okay.
The sooner you file, the less likely it is that someone will try to file a fraudulent return using your information.
Early birds get the peace of mind. What's our second tip?
Choose direct deposit for your refund.
Okay.
It's safer and faster than dealing with a paper check.
Direct deposit for the win. What else?
Keep those contact details updated with the IRS. You don't want important letters getting lost in the mail because they have an old address on file.
Make sure they know where to find you. And lastly,
Consider getting that IPPIN for an extra layer of security on your tax account.
that's right, an IPPIN acts as your secret tax code, making it much harder for someone to file a return in your name.
Exactly. These are all simple but effective steps that can significantly reduce the risk of identity theft and make the tax filing process smoother.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still more to unpack. We haven't even touched on the specific letters the IRS might send you or what those letters mean.
That's right, and those letters can be confusing.
You know, it's understandable why people might feel a little uneasy when they get a letter from the IRS,
Right.
especially one asking them to verify their identity.
Oh, absolutely. It's not something you expect in your mailbox every day.
Right.
And with so many scams out there,
Exactly.
it's natural to be cautious.
So let's talk about those letters.
Okay.
What are some of the specific ones people might receive?
Okay.
And what should they do if they get one?
Well, there are a few different letters the IRS might send,
Okay.
each with a slightly different purpose,
Mhm.
but they all essentially boil down to the same thing.
Okay.
The IRS needs you to confirm your identity to protect you and themselves from potential fraud.
That makes sense. So what are some of the specific letters people might get?
One common letter is Notice CP01A.
Okay.
This one is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's simply letting you know that the IRS has received your tax return and is processing it.
Okay, so that one isn't necessarily about identity verification.
Right. It's more of a confirmation notice.
Got it.
But it's important to keep an eye out for it
Okay.
because it sets the stage for what might come next.
All right. So CP01A, confirmation that your return is being processed.
Right.
What other letters should we be aware of?
Now, if the IRS needs to verify your identity,
Yeah.
you might receive a letter 5071C,
Okay.
6331C,
Uh-huh.
4883C,
Okay.
or 5747.
Okay, so those are the ones that signal the need for verification.
Exactly.
What are the differences between them?
The main difference is in how they ask you to verify your identity.
Got it.
For example, if you receive a 5071C or 6331C,
Uh-huh.
you might have the option to verify either online or by phone.
Okay.
The IRS generally prefers online verification because it's the fastest and easiest way to complete the process.
Online is definitely my preference too, less hassle.
Yeah.
What about those other letters, 4883C and 5747C?
If you receive a 4883C,
Yeah.
it means the IRS needs you to verify your identity specifically over the phone.
Okay.
There won't be an option for online verification in this case.
Got it.
And if you get a 5747C,
Uh-huh.
well, that means you'll need to schedule an appointment for in-person verification at your local taxpayer assistance center.
So 5747C is the one where you actually have to go meet with the IRS face-to-face.
Exactly.
I'm guessing they don't request that very often.
That's right. In-person verification is usually reserved for situations where the IRS needs additional clarification or documentation that can't be easily provided over the phone or online.
Makes sense. So you get one of these letters asking for verification.
Okay.
What kind of information will the IRS need from you?
They'll typically ask for information to confirm your personal details
Okay.
and tax filing history.
Uh-huh.
This might include your social security number,
Mm-hmm.
date of birth,
Yep.
prior year tax return information,
Okay.
and details about your dependents,
Uh-huh.
if you have any.
It sounds like it's helpful to have all of your tax documents organized and accessible in case you need to provide this information.
Absolutely. Having everything in order can definitely streamline the process
Right.
and reduce stress. It's
Yeah.
like having all your ducks in a row tax style.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So you've verified your identity, either online, by phone, or in person.
Okay.
What happens next?
Once the IRS successfully verifies your identity, they can resume processing your tax return.
That's a relief. But we talked earlier about potential delays.
Right.
Is there anything people should be aware of in terms of timing?
You're right. Even after successful verification,
Mm-hmm.
your refund might take a little longer to process than usual.
Yeah.
The IRS estimates it could take an extra 3 to 9 weeks.
That's a significant delay, especially for people who are depending on that refund.
Yeah.
Is there anything they can do to speed up the process?
Unfortunately, not really. Once you've provided the necessary information,
Yeah.
it's simply a matter of waiting for the IRS to complete its internal processes.
Okay, so patience is key in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
But what if, for whatever reason, the verification isn't successful?
Okay.
What happens then?
If the IRS isn't able to verify your identity using the information you've provided,
Uh-huh.
they might ask you to provide additional documentation.
Okay.
This could include things like a copy of your driver's license,
Mm-hmm.
passport,
Right.
or other official forms of identification. They might also request documents to further validate your tax filing information, like pay stubs,
Yeah.
bank statements,
Okay.
or receipts.
So even if the initial verification doesn't work out, there's still a path forward?
Exactly. It just might require a bit more back and forth with the IRS
Right.
to provide the necessary documentation.
And in some cases, they might require you to file a paper return.
Yes, that's a possibility.
Ah, yes, the good old paper return, a blast from the past.
It's not ideal, but sometimes it's the most reliable way to ensure all the information is accurate and legitimate.
Right. All right. We've talked about the letters,
Mm-hmm.
the different verification methods,
Right.
what happens after verification.
Yeah.
And even the possibility of having to file a paper return.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
Those scams.
Right.
They're becoming more and more sophisticated, right?
You're absolutely right. Scammers are constantly evolving their tactics, making it harder to distinguish between legitimate communication
Uh-huh.
and fraudulent attempts to steal your information.
So how can people protect themselves from these scams,
Right.
especially during tax season when they're already on edge about their finances?
Well, the most important thing to remember is that the IRS will never initiate contact with you
Yep.
through phone, email, or text message.
Got it.
If you receive any unsolicited communication claiming to be from the IRS,
Yeah.
especially if they're asking for sensitive information like your social security number or bank account details,
Right.
it's a huge red flag.
That's a great point. The IRS just doesn't operate that way.
Exactly.
What else should people watch out for?
Another common tactic scammers use is creating a sense of urgency or fear. They
Right.
might demand immediate payment
Huh?
or threaten you with arrest or legal action if you don't comply with their demands.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fall for it.
Right.
The IRS doesn't operate like that.
No,
If you ever have any doubts,
Yeah.
hang up the phone, delete the email,
Mm.
and contact the IRS directly through their official website or phone number to confirm the legitimacy of the communication.
It's always better to err on the side of caution when it comes to your personal and financial information.
Absolutely.
So what should people do if they think they've already been targeted by a scammer?
First of all, don't panic.
Okay.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And remember that you're not alone.
Right.
Scammers target millions of people every year.
I'm sure.
The important thing is to act quickly and decisively.
Uh-huh.
Don't engage with them any further.
Okay.
Don't provide any personal information.
Got it.
And don't click on any links in suspicious emails or text messages.
Right.
Instead, report the scam to the IRS immediately
Okay.
through their website or phone number.
Hmm.
They have dedicated resources to help victims of identity theft and tax fraud.
That's good.
And if you're feeling threatened or harassed,
Yeah.
don't hesitate to contact your local law enforcement agency.
That's solid advice. Report it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't engage.
Right.
And seek help if needed.
Exactly.
Now, we've talked about a lot of potential problems,
Mm-hmm.
but let's shift gears and talk about solutions.
Okay.
We mentioned earlier that there are some proactive steps people can take to make this entire verification process smoother
Right.
and minimize the risk of encountering issues.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other tips you can share that we haven't already covered?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's hear them. I'm always up for more tips.
First, be meticulous when filling out your tax return.
Okay.
Double check all of your information,
Hmm.
including your social security number,
Mhm.
dependents information,
Okay.
income details,
Yep.
and deductions.
Got it.
Mistakes, even small ones,
Yeah.
can trigger the verification process.
Right.
So accuracy is key.
Those little typos can really come back to bite you. What else?
Another good practice is to file your taxes electronically.
Okay.
E-filing significantly reduces errors compared to paper filing,
Mhm.
and it often speeds up the processing time.
Uh-huh.
Plus, most tax software programs have built-in error checks
Yeah,
that
yeah.
can catch mistakes before you submit your return.
E-filing, it's faster, more accurate, and let's face it, way less of a headache than dealing with those paper forms. What's our final tip?
This one is about awareness.
Okay.
Be aware of the IRS's official communication channels.
Uh-huh.
Familiarize yourself with their website address, phone number,
Okay.
and the types of letters they typically send.
Got it.
This knowledge can help you quickly identify suspicious communication
Right.
and avoid falling victim to scams.
That's a great point. The more you know about how the IRS operates, the better equipped you'll be to spot those red flags.
Yeah.
And speaking of resources,
Yeah.
aren't there organizations that can provide free tax assistance to those who need it?
You're absolutely right.
Right.
Organizations like the AARP Foundation Tax Aid Program
Okay.
and the Volunteer Income Tax Assistant,
Yeah.
or VITA program,
Okay.
offer free tax help to eligible individuals.
Especially seniors and low-income taxpayers.
That's fantastic. I had no idea those resources existed. Where can people find more information about these programs?
You can easily find information about tax aid on the IRS website.
Okay.
They have a dedicated section for free tax preparation services.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed or unsure about how to handle your taxes, don't hesitate to reach out for help.
Right.
There are resources available to guide you through the process.
Exactly. You don't have to navigate this alone.
Right. Well, let's start with the role of technology in this whole process.
Okay.
I remember we briefly touched on ID Mary earlier.
Right.
They're a third-party identity verification service used by the IRS.
Right. It's how you verify your identity to access your online IRS account.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now think about this for a second.
Okay.
The IRS, a government agency, is relying on a private company to handle a critical part of its security process.
That's interesting.
It's a fascinating example of how technology is changing the way we interact with government institutions.
Yeah, it really highlights the increasing reliance on digital identity in our modern world.
Precisely. And this raises some interesting questions.
Right? Wait.
What are the implications of entrusting sensitive personal information to these third-party companies?
Right.
How secure are their systems?
Yeah, good question.
What happens if there's a data breach?
Wow.
These are all things worth considering.
It's almost like a philosophical question, right? Where do we draw the line between convenience and privacy in this digital age?
Absolutely. It's a complex issue with no easy answers,
Right.
but it's something we need to be aware of as our digital footprints continue to grow.
For sure. Now, shifting gears a bit, I'm curious about something else.
Yeah.
We've talked about the various reasons why the IRS might need to verify your identity, but are there any situations where it's more likely to happen?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
There are definitely certain factors that can increase the likelihood of being asked to verify your identity.
Oh, okay. Like what?
For example, if you're claiming certain tax credits or deductions,
Okay.
like the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit,
Uh-huh.
the IRS might be more likely to scrutinize your return.
So claiming those benefits might trigger a closer look?
Exactly. Those credits and deductions are often targets for fraud.
Right.
So the IRS is extra cautious when processing returns that claim them.
Makes sense.
Similarly, if you've had identity theft issues in the past, or if you're filing from a new address,
Okay.
the IRS might flag your return for verification as a precautionary measure.
It sounds like it's all about minimizing risk and protecting both the taxpayer and the government from fraud.
Precisely.
Okay, now let's talk about something that can really trip people up.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Those IRS letters.
Oh, yeah.
We mentioned earlier that they can be confusing. Sometimes the language is a bit technical, right? And it's not always clear what the IRS is asking for.
It can be confusing.
I've heard that from a lot of people, it can be stressful trying to decipher those letters.
Absolutely, but here's a pro tip.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask for clarification. If you receive a letter that you don't fully understand, call the IRS directly.
Yep.
They have dedicated phone lines for identity verification issues.
Good to know.
And their representatives can walk you through the process and answer any questions you might have.
So it's okay to pick up the phone and ask for help.
Absolutely. In fact, it's encouraged.
That's good.
The IRS wants to ensure that you understand what's being asked of you and that you can provide the necessary information to verify your identity.
And remember, they'll never ask for sensitive information like your social security number or bank account details over the phone.
Exactly. Be cautious of any unsolicited calls or emails claiming to be from the IRS.
Right.
If in doubt, hang up and contact the IRS directly through their official website or phone number.
Now, I know we've already covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I have.
But is there anything else people should keep in mind as they navigate this process? Any final words of wisdom?
I think the most important takeaway is that IRS identity verification, while it might seem intimidating at first, is ultimately a safeguard.
Okay.
It's designed to protect you from fraud
Right.
and ensure that your tax refund goes to the right person.
It's about peace of mind in the end, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by understanding the process, being prepared, and knowing where to find help if you need it, you can navigate this process with confidence.
Great.
Remember, knowledge is power when it comes to taxes.
Oh, true.
The more you know, the less intimidating it becomes.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into IRS identity verification, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
I hope they come away feeling empowered, not intimidated.
Okay.
IRS identity verification is a process. And like any process, it can be understood and managed by taking those proactive steps we discussed, staying informed, and knowing where to find help if needed. They can approach this process with a sense of control and confidence.
Excellent advice. And remember, if anything ever seems suspicious or unclear, don't hesitate to reach out to the IRS directly.
Exactly.
They're there to help.
They are.
Well, that concludes our deep dive into IRS identity verification.
It does.
We hope you found this information helpful.
I hope so.
And that you feel more equipped to handle this process should you ever encounter it. Thanks for joining us